Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, George McMillan III. These might be in order. These might be randomly uploaded with other guests in between. Welcome back, everybody. This is a marathon recording session with George. This is the 5th hour officially. George is great, as usual. We've had some food now. We took a little break. We're back to recording Comedy Gold for you guys. George? Anything
What?
to say? Are you ready for some more comedy?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm never tired of comedy.
Everybody who's new here, this is a comedy show. Nothing we say has anything to do with reality. Speaking of, the value-neutral bifurcated dichotomy methodology. Just pronouncing these things requires a PhD. George, you want to take it away?
Just say it over and over again 10 times, you'll get it. But anyway, what we were going over, and the other one was, again, I always talk about Tubin Kosmita's Psychological Foundations of Culture. They talk about how chaotic the social sciences are. And Alan Bloom's Closing the American Mind, they took the classical works of Plato and Aristotle out of the system, how governments change form, what kind of governments are, there are most governments are in the perverted form. That's where it usually tends to. Under what conditions do proper forms of government exist, and why can't humans seem to maintain them? Is the perennial questions. The 7P Plan papers was talking about the transformation of America. It's supposed to go to a utopian system. It will go to a dystopian system. I think a lot of people are realizing that. So the 7P Plan talks about how the Frankfurt School came in and changed the curriculum and what the curriculum is. So that's kind of like a problem. The 7P Plan is kind of like a problem statement. Or where Tubin and Kosmitas talk about how the social or the university system abandoned the scientific project. The 7P Plan papers discuss how the left changed the scientific, dropped the scientific project in order to pursue critical race theory, critical gender theory to achieve a leftist agenda. So here we're talking about how Tubin and Kosmitas are looking at the social sciences from their fields of evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, wondering why the philosophical and social sciences is so messed up. And we're explaining that because the left, in order to avoid performing autopsies on failed Marxist experiments, stop teaching the liberal versus conservative theories, during the 70s and 80s, and have been really tuning them out ever since. Jordan Peterson had a conversation on that with Jonathan Haidt from NYU, I don't know, like 5 years ago or 6 years ago or something like that. What they were talking about was it's conservative opinions that have been taken out of the university system. No, I'm going another step higher than that. The left actually took out the accurate theories of human behavior, because you're discussing the impact of religious and ideological belief systems on human nature. Then you're talking about whether they create a constructive behavioral dynamic or a destructive behavioral dynamic. And before I was talking about Maslow, Rogers, Fromm, and Paul Tillich were working on that they were at Union Theological, Jewish Theological Seminary, and Columbia about the same time period, working on that subject matter. They developed those theories, and then because they're based on the two-gender domain-specific premise, they have been casually just discarded over time, because you have to believe in the 57 gender domain general premise to be included in the curriculum, or
You're not
what they do. Yeah,
Or
otherwise well, the German painter type person.
No, like the
Or
modern
the,
Nazi, the one
the
that every
Austrian.
argument in the internet turns into. There's a term for it. I forgot the term.
Yeah.
You know, that it only takes so many arguments on the internet before somebody calls somebody a Nazi, for not agreeing with their opinion.
So, right. Well, I try to stay to the upper end of Graham's hierarchy of disagreement. So we're talking about the central argument. But yes, most people go towards the bottom end. Anyway, so here you get to 2006, 2009 with Herbert Gintis. I explained before, he started out being a leftist when he got his when he was working through graduate school. Well, he went to, I think it was Penn, and then he went to Harvard. I can't remember. Anyway, he ended up getting his PhD at Harvard. Worked through the Cold War, found out that Marxist centrally planned economies had really just abysmal economic growth rates. He switched over, became free market ideology. He's a mathematician. He was heavily into von Neumann Morgenstern's theory of game in economics, theory of games in economics. Yeah, in 1944. And but then he realized, okay, real people don't really do in-depth statistical analysis. People have to make on-the-fly heuristic judgments, moment to moment. Kind of like OODA loop. People are in a continuous observe, orient, decide, act, kind of mindset. They're not doing in-depth calculations for every single thing that they do during the daytime. So with John Maynard Smith's evolutionary game theory, that really shifted game theory to a different level, because it's a looser, it's got looser caveats to it, looser restrictions, but it's actually much more indicative of human behavior. So people don't want to go after maximal gains, because maximal gains usually imply maximal risk of where you can get killed in the process. But if you're too timid, then everybody just takes your food, and so you die anyway. So evolutionary theory is a balance between, too much risk and then not enough risk. So that's usually depicted in hawk and dove games, where if you're too hawkish, you'll get injured and you die. And if you're not aggressive enough, if you're too much of a dove, well, then you're going to die of starvation. So they play hawk and dove games. So that's how Gintis went from game theory to evolutionary theory, then read Tooby and Cosmides and E.O. Wilson's, and then started wondering why the social sciences are just logically incoherent.
I can't. What about chicken hawks? Chicken hawks?
That I'm gonna have to think about that. Okay.
All right, get back to it later. Keep going.
All right.
Sorry, I just had to.
You need a meme. You gotta throw a meme in.
I didn't have a meme ready. I didn't have a meme ready. I can't. You just said hawks and doves, and I was like, damn, what about chicken hawks? It took me a while to remember the term. Sorry. I had to.
So Gintis 2006, 2009 doesn't know that the frameworks already exist. So he wants to take Tooby and Cosmides integrated causal model, and he wants to extend it to the rest of philosophical and social sciences, but he doesn't know how. He thinks the common methodology is going to have to be created and developed, and he thinks the compatible frameworks are going to be developed. Now, I did email him in 2015 and tell him that this was actually easy. I was still working overseas by the time I got back. Well, he died shortly thereafter, so I never got to meet him face to face. Whatever. Yeah, we'll get into a long story about that one of these days. So anyway, both the methodologies do exist, and he said he talked to a whole bunch of different psychology professors, and he says that their field has never been schematized. what I just went over, yeah, go back to the other slide set. What was that, 11 or 12?
11, I think. 12.
Yeah, well, if you go back to 10, all the books of Fromm, Carl Rogers, and Abraham Maslow were psychological fulfillment theories, and they're written in the constructive versus destructive format in a core periphery format. What's common to all people, how it differentiates, and then whether it's good or bad. So it's already in that framework. So he doesn't know that that existed. And my comment on that was anything that's based on a two-gender premise, they got rid of. Why do I say that? Well, Gintis is talking to psychology professors. Okay, where does he go? He goes to Ivy. He went to Penn and Harvard. So he's probably talking to Ivy. He's probably talking to, quotes, top-level psychologists, and they don't know that this stuff has existed, which is back to my premise. Anything reasonable got discarded out of the field of psychology that was men are based, well, domain specific is men are different than women. That's all that means.
Crazy concept, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Radical.
And instead of teaching at a major university, I'm talking to you. Because I stuck to the radical.
You're not even talking to me. No, you're not even mansplaining. We're having to make a comedy show about it in order to get this on the record. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a university course. It's not stuff that you can pick up anywhere. It's not even like a lecture per se. It's a comedy show that is discussing these kind of topics because of the state of 1984 we live in. So Aristotle's six forms of government, or should we keep moving on?
You get better news. Yeah, no, stick at Aristotle's six forms of government, because that's where we're really starting this video off at. So, yeah, speaking about comedy show, like Jimmy Dore saying, he's a comedian. You know, you're getting more news from watching his show than any of the other cable news shows. But anyway,
he's about as much a comedian as I am an American, and I'm very much not an American. Let's put it that way. Jimmy Dore is a special case. Did you know he spat at Alex Jones? Let's not go there. Aristotle's six forms of let's not go there. It's a comedy show, not a reality.
All right. Anyway, so how do I know what to look for? I started out I'm a political scientist that studies international political economy and the history of political philosophy. I mentioned before I took the one class that talked about family form, belief systems, and ideology, you know, liberal versus conservative format. I had another professor who taught a class in liberal versus Enlightenment philosophy, so I got the Hume-Smith model, and actually both of them, that's where I got the Hume-Smith versus Marx Engels model after those courses that took a few semesters, and then that was 30 years ago, so those books are very long, so to go to get introduced into it and then actually learn it, it's a lot of reading. So I started out trying to say, okay, if you got Hume's model and you're going from the foundational political, economic, geopolitical sequence, how do you fill in that with a system of upgraded theories? Well, Aristotle's six forms of government, I realize, is 2,500 years old, but it's never been surpassed. So this is the anchor, this macro independent variable actually anchors the whole system. I really started off with this because in this system, he's got the three value neutral forms of the rule of the one, rule of the few, rule of the many. The proper forms are monarchy, aristocracy, constitutional democracy, which would be a republic, or the perverted forms would be tyranny, despotism, oligarchy, mob rule, or democracy. So I'm looking for, I'm looking for a psychological psychological frameworks to match it. So I'm looking for that constructive versus destructive behavioral dynamic aspect of the theories. Whatever's not written in that format, you discard. Whatever is written in that format, you look at it, because the framework has got to be the overarching framework inside the discipline, meaning it has to absorb all the smaller theories, and it has to link laterally to the other disciplines. Now, there are some works that are not written in that format that are explanatory monographs that are very good, but not as overarching models. We need it. It's got to absorb everything in the discipline and then integrate with the neighboring disciplines. So that's what we're looking for overarching theories. So if I have Aristotle's 6 Forms of Government, I pour through a whole bunch of books. Okay, it helps because one of my sisters has a PhD in psychology. So I just happen to have these books lying around the house, and I just happen to have the right ones lying around the house. So a lot of this is luck, because I had Fromm's Anatomy of Human Destructiveness lying around the house, and I had Maddie's book lying around the house because of my sister. Well, Gintis wished that he had those books lying around his house, because otherwise he wouldn't be writing these books saying that the methodologies and the compatible frameworks exist, because they do. So a lot of this is luck, and I did say, well, I wonder if there's other books out there, and I spent days, all day, in libraries in South Florida, going through a whole bunch of first chapters and, well, the table of contents, first chapters, prefaces, forwards, just reading a whole bunch of books to see if I'd missed any.
For the people watching this in the far future, where this is served as a history lesson, do you want to explain what books and libraries are?
Yeah, no, this took me a long time to do. I was actually in South Florida, so we'll get into that later. But yeah, I played ice and roller hockey all over South Florida, and I went to Atlantic, Florida Atlantic University and University of Miami. I would go use those 2 libraries is what I would do. But yeah, I would look at hardcover books and just, because you can't even look at this on the internet. I need to be looking at tables of contents, and I need to go back before the 1980s, because after that, the professors don't do that kind of work. So I need to go back when the professors actually taught that men are different than women, or actually believed it. Now that, whatever. It's
let's not go there.
Let's not go there. It's a comedy show. We will laugh about the people that think that men and women are different. We're going to laugh about that.
Exactly. Aristotle's 6 Forms of Government, the behavioral qualitative crossroads.
All right. So, So just on 13 real quick. Aristotle's 6 Forms of Government is incorporative of Plato's and Cicero's, but not vice versa. So Aristotle's becomes controlling. It covers the full range of human behavior. And then the political power theories. Democracies don't exist. There is always a political elite, like C. Wright Mills's book, the American political elite. It's always some kind of elite. So in the rule of the one, rule of the few, rule of the many, there never really is anything as a rule of the one. Even an autocrat has to depend on his generals. So it's always a rule of the very few, basically. And democracy never really exists, because getting 100% of the people to vote on 100% of the issues, it's completely unworkable. So it really is
crazy conspiracy theorist.
But really, the rule of the one doesn't exist, and the rule of the many doesn't really exist. So Robert Merschel's theory in 1911 is correct. There's an iron law of oligarchy. So you really have rule of the very few, the few, and an extended few is basically what you get. So that rule, his 3 value neutral forms, that's a low to high consensus scale. All right, measurement systems. You got nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Nominal is just a scale, high to low, or balance scale. Ordinal is when you cut it in half, good or bad or something. Ordinal is when you chop it up into little categories. Okay, I used a football field analogy. It's in 10-yard increments of numbered, and then it's also in 5-yard increments, but the hash marks are in 1-yard increments. So that's an example of an ordinal level of measurement. Ratio, you're saying one thing causes another in mathematical function forms. So you're taking 2 ordinal levels of measurement and you're putting them in a causal format to get an X and Y axis. And then you can start calculating slope to build Cartesian models. So that's how you take data and start building mathematical models. So he has a high to low value neutral consensus scale, and then it gets valued into proper and perverted forms or constructive and destructive behavioral dynamic dichotomy. So now with his system of framework, I went back and I started looking at psychological theories that follow that format. Like I said, I didn't have to look very far. My sister had them laying around her room. So yeah, I was fortunate enough just to have the books literally laying around the house. So a lot of this is just pure luck. Anyway, I found them. Gintis didn't know that they exist. He got sick and died before I got back from overseas to have a meeting with him, so that never happened. So anyway, life still goes on, or at least for me, for the time being anyway. So you got the value neutral constant he's aware of, but he doesn't know the independent variable of Fromm and Maddie, and he doesn't know that Aristotle's 6 forms of government follows that format. So then you get into, we'll go to, since this format allowed me to link the fields of psychology to it and ultimately evolutionary psychology to that, it becomes the crossroads. Because then I can take his proper and perverted forms and link them to the virtuous and vicious economic theory cycles of economic non-growth or growth and non-growth dichotomy. So good or bad in economics is virtuous versus vicious cycles, or growth versus non-growth models. So we'll go to slide 15. Yeah. Okay, so for the dependent variable, I'm using the per capita GNP ratio, and I don't mean that as a microeconomic measure. I'm using it to mean economic growth theories over demographic rates of change. Economic growth over population growth. No, actually, we'll do it later. I won't do it this way. So this is where Aristotle's 6 forms of government is the qualitative crossroads of the philosophical and social sciences. This is the quantitative crossroads. Because if you're saying economic growth over population growth, it's supply and demand proportions, so it can link to other areas of economics. Well, it can link to all the areas of economics, because supply and demand theories are not only early growth theories, they're also general equilibrium theories of Walras, Pareto, and Arrow-Debreu models. So once you can use the per capita GNP ratio to get into any other area of economics that you want. So the field of economics has had a common methodological framework for a long time. Okay, so then the framework also links to the 4-category geopolitical form model. We're going to get to that next. Yeah, and I already said, yeah, so it absorbs every, you can get to it, you can get to every theory in this field. It doesn't absorb it. With Plato, with Aristotle's 6 forms of government, you're talking about a measurement scale that covers the full range of human behavior. With the 4-category geopolitical form model, you're covering a framework that covers the full theory of human behavior. But with the dependent variable, you're talking about a high or a low. So it's the water level in between the two other measurement sticks. Think of it like that. All right, so now let's go to 16. All right, versatility of the per capita GNP ratio is the actual ratio is consumer spending plus investment plus government spending over N people. Or it's usually just written C plus I plus G over N people. And I discussed, it means I'm using it to mean economic growth rates of change over population growth rates of change. When you look at it in those terms, it integrates the field of economics and demography, or it means economics over polity, because N people is going to be a polity, a political system. So then, in this sense, I'm sorry. It connects economics to politics. And in the philosophical sense, it integrates Hume, Smith, and the Vernon Smith model over Thomas Malthus in his Principle of Population. So it integrates economics, demographics, political science, and then geopolitics. It's a way to quantify those measurement systems. So because it's able to relate, you can look at it in different ways. It's the quantitative crossroads, because now you can use this measurement system to start analyzing the other different forms, whether they're effective or ineffective, constructive, destructive, optimal, suboptimal, whatever your good or bad measure or good or bad word is. So now let's go to 17. Talking about Panesian dime models and the old 5 and 6 power center theory methods of analysis that we're using. Well, here it is. The Solo Swan models went from supply and demand to different levels of growth. Okay, you're tracking the 2 trends of technology and population growth over time. People produce more tools without them. So economics is heavily based on technology. But to do that, you have to bring resources from where they are to a factory, to where the people are organized to to process those things into something that you can make a consumer process out of. And then that has to go through several different layers, because one factory's end product is going to be another factory's raw material. Think of steel. Somebody makes steel ingots, then they got to send it to Detroit for them to make cars out of. And then, make car parts, and then it becomes a whole car. So, it's a multi-layer process. And this multi-layer process works best in a free market system, because you have a whole bunch of competitors continuously making products. So if you're a car manufacturer, someone's got a new invention on how to do something, you can quickly just switch subcomponent manufacturers and upgrade that aspect of your vehicle without redesigning the whole vehicle. You're just bringing in the components, or your engineers work with their engineers to make it fit your design for the next model year or next model cycle. So it's these different cycles that you're integrating very, very quickly in a market system that of suppliers and sub-suppliers, that a centrally planned system is just too slow. You need bureaucratic approval in a Soviet system, which means you got to kiss somebody's ass for every little thing. Entrepreneurs in the West can just go buy what they need, do a proof of concept model, go find investors, or slowly build up their business, however they're going to do it, and then expand. And then it's always any major invention comes out of the tactical to practical. But the parts that entrepreneurs use wouldn't exist unless they were originally invented for a military application. Jobs and Wozniak wouldn't have been able to make the old Apple computers unless the electronic parts existed for them to go to Radio Shack and reassemble them. Radio Shack wouldn't have them if the government wasn't using those subcomponents in different advanced research projects. So yes, they're going to exist for a decade in secret in DARPA-funded projects before they hit Radio Shack or Tiger Direct or whatever. After they got a new model, then they'll release the classified models to the general public. The elites will buy them, and they'll decide, I like this product more than that product. Hey, let's spend $10 billion to get a factory to make this thing, and then we're going to mass produce it and drop the unit cost so everybody can go to Walmart or whatever and buy it, for really super cheap. So computers and electronics, following Moore's law, get the cost declines by half, and the computer power doubles every few years, right? Moore's law. So solo swan models capture that kind of economic growth, but also when you get the introduction of infrastructure. So if you have seaports, railroads, and highways to move raw materials to the processing factories and start moving them around, you will do that much, much faster with that transportation infrastructure than without it. If you have electricity, roads, sewers, and water, so you can live sanitarily, your workers will be way more productive with that under those conditions than not in those conditions. So every time you add one of those factors, how much productivity increases. So Promethean dye models, we're going to go to dye models. Diplomatic, infrastructural, informational, military, economic. Okay, your infrastructure and informational is transportations and communications. If manufacturers can call up and say, hey, I need more of this, less of that, or they get communicated that a better product has come along, a better hard drive, a better integrated circuit, what have you, they stop buying from their old producer and start buying from the new one. So the sub-producers are always trying to leapfrog each other. They're always trying to obsolesce each other. See, it's this kind of competition that did not exist freely in a non-market system, of everybody continuously trying to leapfrog somebody, because if you don't, you're out of business in 10 years or less. BlackBerry would be an example. As soon as the iPhone came out, their sales plummeted. So your business can be thriving. Look at Digital Equipment Corporation. They were doing great. The IBM computer clones came out, and then all of a sudden, the mainframe business was out of business. So these kind of changes occur because people are continuously competing in their space. They don't know what's going on in other industries, but they know everything that's going on in their industry. Well, and then a couple of, one or two hops out, of course. But they're heavily focused and competitive within a certain sphere. And if ever they have a subcomponent that they need, they just go buy it. They don't have to ask for anybody's permission. In a free market system, you just get it. So solo swan models start to take all those different economic theories that were invented separately and it starts to put it together in one, and it's in an economic growth, population growth format. So then when people in the old videos wonder where I was getting the Pabesium dime model out of, it's the compilation of these different economic theories.
George, for comedic effect, I have to say I kind of maybe probably agree with most of what you're saying about it working probably better that way, but you have to take the caveat that for example, the military-industrial complex in the U.S. has proven that that is not exactly the way it works. You know what I mean? With like, you know, end profits being, and like, you know, the profit margins being the be all end all basically of, you know, service, supply, and manufacture of goods, in this case arms, but very limited in that competition or competitive sphere of what you were describing just there. No?
I get your point. Oh, the government spending is the worst thing around. But that kind of spending is tremendously wasteful. Oh, absolutely. But what is it that you're funding? They're funding the top engineering schools. Well, they're funding engineering schools for different things. Mm-hmm. So the money spent there pays back because the students then go into the private sector where this competition does exist. But without the fund, without the tremendously wasteful funding going into the DoD to build these, well, okay, whenever you're building something that doesn't exist, yes, cost overruns happen. Oh yeah, and there's no way about it. If you try to fix that, well, you're not going to fix it. You're just going to end up destroying it. But what like you have F-35? To do, well, that's a different thing. Well, now you're talking about other. We no longer have the system. Again, go back to 7P plan. The education system changed. The government's changed. It's becoming less functional. So you got that change of more of heavy corruption. We'll call it inefficiencies because, you know, the West is. We've gone from a high trust society when I was a kid to a very low trust society now.
Very low. So I'd call it zero. I'd call it zero, man.
Can't be extreme zero.
So absolute zero doesn't exist, right? PC GNP ratio.
Yeah.
Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations has been upgraded over time. You want to keep going?
Yeah, Yeah, number 18.
Mm-hmm.
So this one was, you get Adam Smith's qualitative theory. I think that they credit the first mathematizing of economics. I think they credit that to Leon Walras at the Lausanne School in Switzerland. Vilfredo Pareto went there also and started mathematizing the stuff. He was an engineer, and anyway, I won't go into his life history. He had like 27 cats or something like that. Anyway, I always thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, they started mathematizing the discipline. And first of all, they started drawing out supply and demand functions. Okay, that's not really difficult. But just starting from a supply and demand function, just starting from one starting point, you know, over time, every generation of economists or mathematicians start adding something to it. And each generation adds something to the mathematical model to incorporate something. And the field of economics, you know, naturally, because PhD students are trying to outdo each other, right? Just, you know, they're competing against each other. So they're trying to figure out, how do you make the model bigger? They don't shrink. They get, you know, they don't get smaller, they get bigger. So over time, it grew into basic Walras and Pareto models. It went into general equilibrium theories of Arrow-Debreu models 100 years later. And then with computers, you can really start tracking day-to-day sales, because everything you buy on Amazon or just about, well, okay, even if you buy something just in the store, they're scanning their inventory and buying new products. And that information is recorded, tabulated, and now now you're getting real-time user or purchasing statistics to balance supply and demand functions. So these things start to get more intricate, the better you can get your data collection. So the more the data collection side increases, the more the mathematical side also improves. So these, you had from simple supply and demand theories and endogenous growth theories, you had Solo-Swan models and then Arrow-Debreu models, where the mathematics starts to get very complex. I can't do it, they can. So that's why I'm doing this. So now we're going to get to number 20. We got 14 more slides to do, so we got to have to go through these things. All right. When I started out this model, I had Aristotle's 6 forms of government and the per capita GNP function for the reasons just cited. I needed an outcome measure system. So you have the controversy in economic development theory has always been growth versus non-growth, or growth versus equity. So out of that, I just started taking the first and second and third world subjective categories. The Soviet Union was ended, so the second world used to be the East Bloc countries. Well, I just changed it because that no longer existed. So I made the first and second world countries more developed countries. I added a fourth world failed state because instead of third world countries evolving towards first world country status, some of them crashed and became fourth world failed states instead. So not everything moved from third world up.
Would you consider North Korea a failed state, or is that like reserved for like Central African Republic level states?
The Aristotle's 6 forms of government: tyranny and despotism.
So yes, is what you're saying.
It's a form of despotism, but it's a communist ideology with despotism. So it can fit it's got an ideological, because it doesn't have religion. They outlawed it. They didn't outlaw the family though. They still got that. So they don't follow Marx and Engels, to a T. Everybody does it in some kind of cafeteria style method, but he does. Yeah, he's got centrally planned economy and a form of despotism. China started making free market reforms in the 70s. And then even the Soviets, abandoned the collective farming and started going back to privatized farming. And then Gorbachev wanted to be able to repeat that competition that occurs within each subsector of the economy. How do you get to people to have that form of competition and to be able to compete? They need to go out and buy whatever products they need to get it into the factory and start putting that into production. Again, I'll use the iPhone, BlackBerry as an example. iPhones were out and BlackBerries just collapsed a year or two later. That and for some other reasons, but yeah, it happened
some other reasons.
I remember digital equipment was in the early 90s. People, DEC people thought that was just a great company. Within a few years, they were out of business. Oh, well, okay, why do I say that? I was taking a class from the feminist, incrementalist, socialist law professor who talked about how women needed affirmative action because the big businesses were already up and running and women couldn't get into them. Well, just within that next few years, a whole bunch of big businesses just collapsed, and you had a whole bunch of new Silicon Valley businesses that came into place. I mean, you had whole industries that went out of place. In the old school, you used to have voice recording. Well, Dialogic came out, and everything went into voicemail. So you had sometimes a new technology came in and collapsed a whole industry, with the new technology. When you get a key feature that changes a whole sector and then it changes several sectors, you call that a contractive cycle of when a key invention triggers a whole bunch of more inventions, and you get new industries and the old businesses go out of business. Well, the problem with the feminist theory is every time that happens, it's men competing against men, and it never happens with women competing against men or other women. It just has never existed. So empirical models, it's never existed. Women in STEM has never worked. Men and women are different, not good or bad, complementary and different. Okay, they're going to try this DEI experiment to try to change that, and it's not going to change.
We saw how that worked with the Secret Service. For category geopolitical form model and the outcome measure, and then we've got paralleling ultimate cause in philosophy with proximate cause in the social sciences. That's the only two slides that we've got left for today. We're 46 minutes in. We've got to start wrapping this up soon, and we've got a couple of memes to squeeze in there for the comedy of it. George, take it away. Wrap this up for us within slides 20 and 21.
Yeah, no, we're at a good stopping point, because the next what the next part will go for, and we'll leave it and just tell people what it's going to be. You're taking those frameworks, and those frameworks are behavioral forms, micro and macro behavioral forms. The constants over time, with the Arrow-Debreu models and Vogel's charts of technology and population growth, the two overarching trends are technology and population growth. Since the 1950s, it's been moving jobs south and then people migrating north. So you're tracking those phenomenal trends, and then you want to see how those phenomenal trends change the forms. So I got the forms, meaning the frameworks, but form is capitalized because of Plato's forms. Mm-hmm. What Aristotle did was started putting those forms into ordinal level categories. But now there's enough of those ordinal level categories in qualitative terms in enough disciplines to now actually link them across the board. So this project in the history of political philosophy is it takes Plato's forms and it's making an Aristotelian system at it. So in that context, you're taking ultimate cause and you're relating proximate cause in a series of empirical models, of which you can do another hypothetical deductive reasoning process and make another level series of deductions in the field of philosophy. So that's the difference between proximate cause. If you put enough facts together, you start making other extrapolations, and then it's those extrapolations that are ultimate cause, and that's the philosophical level of reasoning. So we'll end it there, just to show people what the last slide said is in this section. Or wait, where's the
21? Where's where we're at?
Yeah, actually, stop it at 25.
25.
Where we're going with this is you can get Heidegger's being and time, alter the title to life force energies as being over changes in form and time. You can now start categorizing, operationalizing Heidegger. And if I get to the point where I can get with the game theory folks and start mathematizing this, represent the whole philosophical level in mathematics. So that's where this is going. So the two forces would be, the empirical, in evolutionary theory, the two forces are going to be self-survival and survival of the species, pursuit of resources and mates, and pursuit of economic gain and social status. Well, if you have those two forces spanning the models, they operationalize being and time in conjunction with the 5 frameworks. So now where we're going to explain when we get back to this in a day or two or whenever is why the whole social science, we have enough now to put the whole social sciences into a 2-force multi-element model. The example is aeronautics is gravity and atmospheric density to lift, thrust, weight, and drag. So that's the model I'm looking at. So now the whole philosophical sciences can go into that 2-force type of modeling, but Gintis didn't think that the frameworks exist. Why? Because the psychologists that he talked to, supposedly they have PhDs. Well, they would. They're actually, anyway, whatever. They didn't know about those frameworks, and they didn't know how to start building models the way I do. But since I had the 3 macro frameworks first, and Tooby and Kosmita's integrated causal model, all I had to do was spend time looking at the models that worked in the field of psychology. We'll end it here, and we'll pick up and explain this more in detail. And I think this one ends at 34, 35.
I'm not sure. Not sure how many we got here. I haven't looked through the whole thing.
Part 2 starts at 35. So we're going to pick it up at, where did we end at, 20?
21, 25, I think you told me to stop at. Just flashing, but we actually only went as far as 2021 in detail. So we'll definitely pick it up somewhere there. Everyone who's here, thank you for being here and not reading a book. This is somewhere in between reading a book and being here. It's like escalator, the like mobile stairs. This comedy show, right? On this little picture here. Also, I want to flash this up there. When someone calls you weird, and you remember the etymology of the word weird. Weird in the 1400s, having power to control fate. From weird, Old English weird, fate, chance, fortune, destiny, and the fates. So yeah, learn your spelling and your etymology when you talk to people. George, thank you again. This was extremely informative. We'll look forward to the next recording session. Everyone who stuck around to the end, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave a comment for George if you got any questions. Check out his website in the description below. And yeah, that's about it. George, anything?
No, I just can't wait till the next one. We've got 80 slides to do left, or actually it's probably going to be 70. I'm going to chop 10 out of this one. Mm-hmm. But then I got another one that's going to be 100 slides. I got another one that's about 150, 200, to get through this section in detail. Yeah, I love it when someone says, oh, you got a straw man argument. No, they don't know how this funnels out.
I don't know how this funnels out, but I do have an inkling of where it is going, because it is pretty clear that the left and the West is falling apart. On that, I think this is more than enough comedy for today for everyone. Yeah. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, as I keep saying. And that'll be that for now. Enjoy.